Hello, welcome to the second video where we're going to demonstrate how to work with the field exercise 1 in regards to the data transfer part of the assignment. This is GIS 210 fall semester 2012, and we are in week 2 of our class. And what we'll do to begin, now again, this is just dealing with the data transfer part, so it's assumed that you've already collected data with your GPS, and if you need help with that, refer to your user manual, because depending on the model that you have will affect the exact method you use to collect the data. So I've also posted a couple demo videos off of YouTube on giving examples of a couple of the different popular Garmin GPS models, and there's a good chance that your specific model is also available on YouTube somewhere, so you might want to check it out if you want some assistance in video format. So what we'll do to begin the data transfer part is go ahead and plug your GPS unit up to the USB cable, hook it all up to your computer and turn the GPS unit on. And I'm going to do that on my end, and I'm working with the eTrex Venture HC model, which is one of the units we have from the Rhone State's GIS lab. I can get it on here. There, my computer has recognized it. If you haven't already done so, you might want to watch some of the other videos I've posted on setting up your DNRGPS software, and I also posted some links to some YouTube videos on again on using this specific model, and I believe the Vista model was another example. So I've got my unit turned on, and now I'm going to start up my DNRGPS software. And I am working with two monitors on my screen and can only record one at a time, so my programs tend to start in the other window, so I'll have to move them over to this recording window after they start up. So you might not see the little startup icon on some of the programs that you would typically see on your end, but that's fine. We'll move them over as they pop up. So now you can see we've got the DNRGPS software running correctly this time. We didn't get any errors. Again, if you haven't already seen it, there is another video available that deals with installing the software and overcoming some potential errors that you may or may not find when you install it on your end. So you can see here the software does recognize the model that I'm running. It even gives me the version of the firmware, the latest version. So what I want to do, I've got track and waypoint information stored on this GPS unit, and the data, I collected it over the summer when I was on vacation out in ArcGIS National Park. And what I did is I recorded some track and waypoints along the trail in what they call the Devil's Garden portion of the park, and it's sort of a real scenic area with a number of different arches, and I guess it seemed like it's an 8-mile trail or something round trip. And for a section of that, I recorded some data. So what we want to do is pull that over, and I'm going to use it sort of in the same format as you're doing for your class exercise. So in your field exercise 1, you're asked to collect data somewhere around your neighborhood. It could be a park, it could be a city block, or whatever. And you're going to collect a track file, and you're going to collect a number of waypoints. So I've got that again here for my area. So let's go ahead and pull some of this information over. First thing you want to do is make sure that you define a projection. And you can see I've already set a projection up for my area. But let me demonstrate how you do that again. First, you go to the File menu, and you go to Set Projection, and you select your datum. And in my case, what I'm doing in my ArcGIS project, I'm going to work with the datum of 1983 in a UTM projection. So that's what I want to define here, and I just click the drop down on the datums and select my datum. You see there's a many datums you can use. In our class, we'll tend to use the NAD 1983 the most, and you'll see there's several of those, and there's like 5 of them just for ArcGIS. I honestly don't know what all of these are. I tend to pick just the basic when I'm selecting, so just select the NAD 1983, and then you have a whole list of projections you can choose from. For my area in Utah, with UTM, it is in Zone 12. Now, most of you will have some data here somewhere in Tennessee, and as long as you're in the area of Knoxville West, then you're going to be using UTM Zone 16 in again for north. If you're east of Knoxville, then you'll probably want to use 17 north. And if you're as far away as like Memphis area, then you might want to use 15 north. If you're like in the Jackson area, I believe that's still 16. So I believe for nearly everybody in the class, you'll be using Zone 16 for your data set. Again, mine, since it's in Utah, I need Zone 12. So I'll select that and say OK. And you can see in the lower left the projection defined. Now, just a side note, the GPS is actually collecting data, in my case, and probably yours as well, in a datum of WGS 1984. And it's probably collecting latitude and longitude for the points. And that's fine, because what this software will do is it does the transfer behind the scenes for you. So you always want to set your projection to what you're using in your ArcGIS project. And now another thing you want to do is, before you start this software, is have your ArcMap running. And I already had started mine, and there you can see it's up. So you want to actually start your ArcMap project first. So if you haven't done that, go ahead and close the DNRGPS software for the moment. Start up ArcMap, let it fully load, and go ahead and also, before you start your DNRGPS software back up, and I've already done this again in mine, but we're going to set a projection for the data frame. And now we'll be talking a lot more about projections here in the next week or two. But just to get you started for this exercise, the way you can define your projection, and now note that we're defining the projection for our project. And this is separate from the layers, okay? But the data frame for this project is called layers by default. So we will right click on that, click on properties, and give it a minute to come up here, and you can see that it says no projection is currently defined. And if you look in the lower right hand corner, you'll see the units are unknown. So those are both indicators that there's not a projection defined. So let's define one. We'll click on the predefined, and we want to go with a projected coordinate system. So we'll click on that, and then we click on UTM, and we go down to the NAD 1983, and then we pick our zone out of here. Okay, Zone 12, apply. We'll say OK. And now you can see our units have changed to meters down here, and we have set up the UTM system that we want in our ArcMap project. So now that we're set up here, we're ready to load data into the project. Now typically you would add data and go ahead and add some layers that you might have, such as a topo map or an aerial photo or something like that. But a lot of you don't know how to do that yet, so we'll skip over that for now. We're just going to at first focus on loading some of our data from the GPS unit, just our raw data files. So we're ready to go on that end. So now let's go ahead and start the DNRGPS back up. And once it starts, you'll have this window again. And notice it remembers the projection that we set before. So it will always remember the last projection that you used. So we've got those matching our ArcMap projection. And so let's go ahead and pull some track data off of our GPS. It's still recognized here. So we can click on track, click on download, and you see it's taking some time here to process. It just takes it a minute. And download complete, and you can see we have a bunch of data entered into what's sort of like a spreadsheet. And there's a lot of information here. If you look across the top, some of the types of things you can see is there's an identified date. You can see the type is a track as opposed to waypoints. latitude, longitude information. The X projection and the Y projection information are in here, and those are probably in UTM, I would guess. But and then looking on through, there's just a lot of other various information. Altitude, I think in meters. The model of the GPS unit that we're using. There's a lot of information like that, and there's a lot of blank information in here as well. Now we could clean this up a little bit. We could before we pull the data over, we could go back into track, or actually even while it's there, I believe we can go into track properties, and anything that's not gray, the gray material has to stay in there, but we can uncheck some of this other information that we don't want to include in our final data file. Let's just take the last 3 as a test and see if it takes them out of the project. And if I scroll over here to the right and see, yeah, indeed it did take everything after the file name out. So there's no data in depth or temp or time, so we could go back in there and go to properties and uncheck that, depth, temp, and time. Say OK. And that cleans some of them up. The display and the color, we can take those out. We go in here and turn off the display and the color, say OK. And since we know the GIS model or GPS model that we're using here, I don't have to leave that in there neither, and the file name looks to be blank. If I scroll down, I don't see any data there. So let's take those 2 out, and we'll go down and take the model and the file name out and say OK. And this kind of cleans it up quite a bit. So it makes our, we get rid of a lot of blank records there. So now the next thing to note, in your case, if you follow the assignment to the letter, you were asked to clear out your cache of your track. So you'll just have one track on there. In my case, I had multiple tracks on there. And so I just wanted to show you that the way, for the older models, the way the DNRGPS software works is it will put a dark, sort of a dark colored line at the beginning of a track. So if I scroll down here, you'll see that eventually, and notice the date here is September 3rd of 2010. So I scroll down here, because I didn't clear my cache. And there you can see there's another bar that starts where the next track begins. So here we're at June 17th in 2012. And this is where I began collecting data on my trip. Now I also collected some data on the 21st, and I believe the 21st was the material I collected at ArcGIS. So we'll use that. Now if you have a newer model, there's a good chance that whenever you selected to download from the track, that a dialog popped up and asked you to pick the track you wanted to download, in which case you just have one track here. So there again, like I said before, you probably only have one track in your unit at this time anyway, so it doesn't matter as much. But if you had multiple tracks, just know that there are at least a couple different ways that the software will give you options to download that information depending on the model of your specific Garmin unit. So the newer ones, I believe, follow a GPX format, and I think they're the ones that have the little dialog that pops up that asks you to pick the file that you want to download. So in either case, you'll get the information here, and then to transfer it into ArcMap, or what you're actually doing is creating a shapefile. In our case, we're going to create a shapefile, and then it will automatically be loaded into ArcMap, so it sort of does two things at the same time. But we want to select the track we want to move over. And again, if you only have one track, one way you can do this is just click up here in the upper left corner, and it will select. Give it just a minute here. There you go. And it will select everything in your spreadsheet there, in your table, all the tracks that you have. And then, if you only have one track, then just click that upper left corner, and it's a quick way to select everything. In my case, I want to pick the track that I want, so I'm going to scroll down to the track that I had before there. Get down, here we go. June 21st. I'm going to click the first record to the first column there to the left of that first record, and then I'm going to scroll down till I get to the end of that. I see either another gray bar or at the end of the file. And, oops, there we go. And I'm going to hold my Shift key down while I click the column next to the last record that was June 21st. And there it selects everything. I can scroll back up and you can see it selected everything just for June 21st. And so that's what's going to get transferred over. The other stuff will be dropped off. And it tells you down here how many rows you've selected. So now that I've selected the material I want to move, then I can go to File, and I want to go to Save To. And there's a lot of choices here. A lot of this newer program appears to let you save into a lot of formats, which is pretty nice. We're mainly going to focus on the ArcMap for this class. But I go to Save To and go to ArcMap, and then go to File. And now one of the videos I've posted gives you a little demonstration of two ways of moving file over. One, it shows you could just click on File, in which case it will ask you to basically to name your file and to pick the format. So if I click that just as an example, you'll see I get a little dialog here, and at the bottom it's already set to Esri Shapefile, and I just have to tell it which folder I want to put it in, and it will simply save that file and then stop. It doesn't put it into ArcMap using that approach. It makes a file that we can use in ArcMap, but we would then have to go in and manually load that. So another way you can do this, and this is the way I recommend that you do, is go to File, Save To, and go down to ArcMap and pick that file out of there. Now we're going to ignore the database and graphics for now. Let's just use File, which is going to give us the option to create a shapefile. And if you don't see shapefile down here in the type box, click the drop down and you see there's a lot of options here, and just pick the shapefile there, because that's the format we want to save in, and then route it over to the folder that you want to save the file in. Now I already have set up a folder on my C drive, and I called it RSCCGIS, and then I called it inside that GIS 210. In your case, you can either follow that approach or just make a GIS 210 folder and write off your C drive. But either way, you need that, what we're going to call a working folder, to come off of your C drive. So under GIS 210, I've already created a folder for intro when I was sort of testing this out earlier. So I'm going to create a different folder here, and this is the one I recommend that you create, and just call it Exercise 1. Okay, for field Exercise 1. And notice that I don't have any spaces in this file folder name, and that's something you'll hear me say a lot during the semester is no spaces in your file names or folder names, and try to keep your names to 8 spaces or less if possible. So we will go in, and Exercise 1 I think is, let's see, yeah, that's 9 spaces. So, but we're going to go ahead and leave it that way for now. A lot of times you can go up to 10, but there's a reason for that, and it's not anything we're going to do today that will affect that. So go ahead and call yours Exercise 1, and we'll talk more about the reason why you want to try to keep it to no more than 8 or 10 characters later. And then double click that folder to open it, and you can see up here at the top that we are now inside Exercise 1. And then we want to give it a file name, and the name I've suggested you use for your tracks is My Track 1. Okay, this way everybody's sort of doing it the same way, and it will make it easier for me to look them over. So, and then we'll save, and when we click save, it asks us what type of file. See, the program knows we have a track, but it asks us anyway what type of format do we want to use, point, line, or polygon basically. And in this case we want to use line, so just click the line option, which I've already selected here, and say OK, and it works for a minute. It tells you down here that it's saving 245 points, and then that it saved successfully. I can say OK, and if I move my window or just click on the window behind it, you'll see that it should have loaded that data into the project. Now I don't see it in the window right here. I can see that it's loaded the layer over here, and just on a hunch what I'm going to do is right click on that layer and give it a minute to pop up the little dialog there, and then go down here and click Zoom to Layer. Okay, and that will zoom into the layer. And it's just simply because I think my window size, I changed the resolution on this window so it would record on a smaller file size, and so the data, normally you would see the data, and on your end you probably will without having to zoom to it. But if not, just follow that route again. Right click on the layer and click zoom to layer. That will pull it in. Now we have a layer here, and in your case, if you only had the one track in your unit, you should see a nice clean layer. Like, I'm going to zoom in to the upper part of this, and you should see a track that resembles what you would expect from your area. Okay, so in my case, this area where my mouse is now up through here is the trail that I walked on. This is where I took a little side trail with a loop and then continued on. The reason I have the straight line in mine, if I zoom out again to the, if I just zoom to the full extent, this straight line represents where my next track began, because I had multiple tracks. So basically at the end of this point down here on the bottom, it was in another part of the state where I used the unit again and collected another track. And for some reason, the units take that last point and connect it to the first point you're beginning on your next track. So what I'm going to have to do in my case is edit that out to delete that line. It's an extraneous line basically that I don't need. I specifically asked you to just do one track in your part of the project so you would not run into this situation. But just in case you do, and because I have it here, I'm going to go ahead and clean this up very quickly and realize again this is dealing with some stuff that we'll be covering later in the 101 class if you're in that class. And if you've already had the 101 class, then chances are you already know how to do what I'm about to show you. But so I'm going to clean this up real quick, and again you may not even have to worry about this for your part. But if you do and you want to clean it up, here's how you would do that. What we want to do is go into edit mode, and so to get into edit mode, we'll find our little edit toolbar icon here and click that and give it a minute to pop up, and it's actually popped up in my other window. Again, I've got two windows on my computer, and so I've drug it over here so you can see it. And if I click the editor drop down, I can click on start editing. Give it just a minute to load, and it loads over here on the right hand side, and it's basically telling me what feature I'm editing right now, and it's already selected track 1 by default, so I can go ahead and it's already selected the edit tool, but I'll click on it again just to make sure, and then let me rezoom here to my layer so that I can see all of it. And then I'm going to double click on this layer, and you'll see that it put a bunch of points here. We've got a bunch of green points over here, and we've got a red point here. The red point is basically the last point in that file. It's your end node, we call it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my mouse over to the top of that point until it becomes sort of a four-headed arrow there that you can see. And very carefully, without letting that arrow slip off, I'm going to right-click and then click on Delete Vertex. And for some reason it doesn't always do it the first time, so I'm going to move back over it again, right click again, and say delete vertex, and the second time it does it. Don't know why I had to do it twice. I think it's because it's the end point. But you can see the red is now moved over into this area, and it keeps this blue line in there by default because I could cancel out if I wanted to, if I felt like I'd made a mistake, and not make any changes. But what I'm going to do now is click anywhere off of that line, and you'll see that it goes away, and I've removed basically that one point which took that entire line out of the picture. So now I can stop editing. So I'll stop editing, and do I want to save my edits? Say yes. And I'll close the little editor dialog, and now I'll rezoom by right clicking and zoom to layer, and now you can see I've got my track that as I would expect it. Now if I had a topo map behind this, which I've got, but I'm not going to show it right now because I don't want to make this too complicated. I basically just wanted everybody to load their track and their waypoints and then save that as a project. If you do know how to acquire an aerial photo and you want to put that in as a backdrop or a topo map, feel free to do so. Just when you upload your exercise, be careful to not upload that file, because that would be probably a really large file. It might take a lot of space, and maybe more space than we have allowed in the Dropbox. So for your own use, you're going to take, I think I asked you to take a snapshot of your final project. So if you do put an aerial behind this, you take a snapshot of it. I'll see that you did that. But don't feel like you have to do that by any means, at least on this first exercise. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and load our waypoints and bring them over. So I've turned my reactivated my DNRGPS by clicking on it over in my taskbar here. And what I want to do first is remove these tracks that are in here now. And what I can do is just select everything and just hit my delete key. And I selected everything again by clicking up in that upper left hand corner. So now that everything's deleted, what I can do is go to waypoint and download the waypoints. And it pretty quickly downloads my waypoints. And in this case, I have a lot of waypoints. I was trying to think if I've got waypoints in here that are not that exist elsewhere, just like I did the track. But as you can see, there's no dark gray lines here separating those, because the track is basically a number of points to make up a track, and the program can differentiate between those by the dates. But in this case, we don't see a date here, and there's no way for me to differentiate my points. In your case, you would have cleared it again, and you would be just pulling over waypoints that you collected, so you'd be safe to just select everything. What I'm going to do is go ahead and select everything and just realize that I'll probably get some points outside of this area around arches, but that's okay for now. The main idea is to show you how to pull the points over. And you basically do it the same way you do the tracks. You selected what you want to pull over. In this case, we selected everything. And then just go to File again, like we did before, Save To, down to ArcMap, and to File. And this time, let's name it My Waypoints, and we'll abbreviate by just say W. I think, now I'm trying to remember how I had it on the exercise. If I just said, hang on just a second here, to be consistent, let me make sure I name it the way I asked you to name it. And if I combine it, okay, what I put in the exercise 1 was to say my WYPTS1. And I don't have to add the dot shape here because I've already selected it as the file type, so it will automatically add the dot shape for me when it saves the file. So if I say save, again it will save and create the file, and since I have ArcMap loaded, it will load it into ArcMap for me. So it tells me it's saved successfully. I can say OK. And now that I've downloaded everything I need from my GPS unit, I can go ahead and close that DNR GPS program and turn off my GPS unit so I can save the batteries there. Okay, and you'll see here that I've got some points loaded now, and these are just representing mostly arches, different features that I saw as I was hiking along the trail. And what I'm going to do just to clean this up a little bit, and again, some of this is stuff you haven't learned yet, so if you want to follow along, this is fine, and you can just do the same thing I'm doing here if you like, or you can just turn in what you have here for this exercise, whichever you want to do. But to kind of clean it up a little bit, what I'm going to do is change the color and the width of my track, and I'm going to do that by selecting over here the little icon next to my symbol in the layer here in the table, what we call the table of contents. So I just left click on that, and it pops up a dialog. It's in my other window, so I'll drag it over here, and I can edit my symbology here basically, and so I can change the color, and I'm going to pick a green color, kind of this leaf green is nice, and I'm going to change the width to 2 instead of 1, and say OK. That thickens my line up a little bit. Now for the points, I'm going to click on that symbol, and there's a symbol I like to use a lot down here. That's the circle with a dot in the middle of it basically, and I can change that color from green to a red color here, We'll go with the Mars red because it's pretty bright. And I'm going to leave the size at 18. That's usually pretty good. Say OK. And that makes the points really jump out. So I've kind of cleaned it up a little bit. And now it might be nice to put some labels if I have some label information to say what those points are. And on some of the points I did enter that as I collected them. Some of them I didn't. But I'm going to go ahead and label it with, let's see what I have there. And now you can just turn labeling on. I just click Label Features. But what happens is the program will use whatever it thinks is the field you want to use for labeling. If you have a field called Label in your attribute information with your file that you collected, it will use that field by default. But I obviously don't have one of those in this case, and so it didn't show anything. It picked a field though, but that field was blank apparently. So what I want to do is right click on the layer itself and go down to Properties and give that a minute to pop up. And then I can click my Labels tab, which is already selected for me here because I used it last time I used the Properties feature. And the labels are turned on, because I just turned them on a minute ago. But if not, you could check this here to turn them on. Leave this to the default and see it's using file name, which remember we actually turned off, and so the file name should be blank anyways. So I'm going to click that drop down, and what I want to use is my ident field, the ident field, okay? And so I'll select that, and I'm going to up the font size a little bit from 8 to about 12, and I'll leave it black. Let's make it bold and italics, and let's give that a try. Now I can just say OK, in which case it will close this dialog and add my labels, or I could just say apply, and I could see one of my labels over here and see if it's what I like. And if it's not, I could easily change it here again without having to open everything up again. But that looks pretty good, so I'll just say OK. And there you can see we have labels for all the features. And I labeled the, like where I had my base camp, I had that labeled. And landscape arch is labeled, and partition arch, and Navajo arch. And then here was just a trail junction, and I had let it default to what the Garmin was putting in there. It was the 25th feature that had been collected, so it put that in. I took a picture here, and there was an overlook here, and then this double O arch at the end of the hike there. So I've got that information, and we've got a good enough project here now to turn in. And again, like I say, you can add some background layers if you know how to do that, but don't feel like you have to at this point. If you're still not comfortable with doing that, this is what I really wanted you to accomplish with this exercise. So what I want to do is save this so I don't lose my work that I've done. So I click on File, and I'm going to say Save As, because I want to route it and make sure that it's going into the folder that I've set up for my working folder. And so click your little drop down here, and see my 210 folder. I'll click on that, and then there's the exercise 1. And then I think what I asked you to do for the naming was to call it MyEXER1. And that's all you have to do. It will automatically add the extension of a .mxd, which is an ArcMap document project extension. So I'll say save, and you'll notice up here at the top it changes from untitled to MyEXER1, and so I've saved my project. So I could close ArcMap now, and I can always reopen this project, and it will open the same way it looked when I saved it. But what I would do now is, before I close this, let's go ahead and take a snapshot. So hopefully you have your image capture software installed by now. I'm using Snagit, so most of it you just click the print screen with most of these programs, and give it just a minute to run. And then what you can do, you can either capture just the window that has your map, or you can capture your entire ArcMap screen if you like. And I'm going to go ahead and do that for now, so I can see my layers over here just for this exercise. And I'm going to go ahead and drag and capture, because my monitors tend to overlap a little bit, and if I don't do it that way, it will capture what's on the other monitor too. So there we go, and it's popped up into Snagit, and I can save it from Snagit. Go to the menu there and Save As, and I'll save it as JPEG. and I've got it set to save as PDF by default, so I need to change it to JPEG, and then let's put it in, let's route it back over to the C drive, and oops, scroll down to our class drive, GIS 210, exercise 1, and then we'll save it in there. And just call it, looking to see what I suggested you name it here. Screenshot. Okay, I think I asked you to do the screenshot, but I didn't tell you how to name it. But if you look on down near the end of the exercise, you'll see I said my exercise1.jpg. So we'll just call it myexer. Oops. CISE1, and it's going to add the .jpg extension by default because that's what I have selected as the type. So I can then say save, and I should have that now saved. I can close that, and I can exit out of my Snagit program, and I can go ahead and close my ArcMap project. And so now we're back to the beginning, and if I open up my Windows Explorer, I can maximize that, and you can see what we ended up with here. Exercise 1, and these are the files that we have saved. We've got our project file, we've got our JPEG. I can open that up just to make sure it captured what I thought it was capturing, and that looks pretty good. And so I'll close that, and we have two shape files. We've got the My Tracks, and we've got the My Waypoints. Now notice that a lot of you are new to GIS, and just something you'll learn is that when we refer to a shape file, it's actually more than one file. You've got your .shp file, which is what you saved, but really when you create a shape file behind the scenes, ArcGIS creates all of these other files that are necessary to go with that shape file. Just the .shape file will not work unless you have these other files with it. So when we refer, it's a little confusing at first, but you'll get used to this. When we refer to a shape file, we're actually talking about multiple files, but notice they all have the name, the first part before the extension, they all have MyTrack1. So these all go together to make the MyTrack1 shape file. And then the My Waypoints only has 4 parts to it, but all of those 4 parts are needed in order for ArcGIS to open that file. So one is a track, or one is a linear feature, and one is a point feature. So we obviously have a few more files apparently that goes along with our linear feature. But taken together, since I saved all of these in the folder called Exercise 1, it makes it real easy for me to finish the exercise by go ahead and selecting all of these files. And I'll hold my Shift key down as I click on the first, or I click the first one, hold the Shift key down and click the last one, and it highlights all of them. Then I can right click while I'm hovering on any one of these. I have to be hovering on at least one or else it will clear the selection. So be careful that you're hovering over one, and this is assuming you're using WinZip. It probably is similar for 7-zip or any of the other compression programs. I'm going to right click while I'm hovering over top of one of those files, and notice everything remains selected. So just be careful and watch. Just to show you, if I had everything selected and I just clicked out to the outside of it, you'll see they all come unselected. So make sure you are hovering over one of them when you do your right click. When I right click, I get a little pop-up dialog, and I have quite a bit of software installed, so I could go either 7-zip or WinZip, but I'm going to use WinZip in this case, and I just go to WinZip, and I can add it a lot of different ways, but I think I had asked you to just save it as Exercise 1 zip, and I did that for a reason, because since our working folder is named Exercise 1, WinZip and 7-zip too, I think, will give you a nice shortcut. It will assume that name if you pick the second option here, so it will add it to Exercise 1 zip. So I'm going to select that one, and that way I don't have to rename my zip file later. And you see at the top here it's created the 1-zip file, Exercise 1. And I'm having you do this. The file sizes are small enough you technically wouldn't have to do this, but you would end up having to load multiple files This way you only have to load one file, and you can see the size is compressed. The size is about a third of what all the other files are put together, so it saves space. And again, they're all small here in this case, but later you'll be uploading some graphics and raster files, which can be very large pretty quickly. So you'll want to get used to doing this compression routine. So that's why I'm asking you to do it here. So we now have the one file. I can go into my momentum site and upload that to finish the exercise. Now I'll log in to the class site and go to the drop box and click on Field Exercise Assignment 1, and this is where I would upload it. Now you're seeing a different look here on my end because I have instructor access, so I have access to everybody's information here. But at this point, it should be pretty self-explanatory about how to upload that file. Just know that the only one you have to upload is the exercise 1 zip. As long as you properly zipped everything into that file, then it will contain all of your data. And so you upload that, and that takes care of exercise 1. So give that a try. It's going to, realize everybody's doing this, or at least a lot of you are doing this for the first time. So that's why I tried to make the exercise pretty simple. I gave you very detailed directions on the assignment to help you along the way, and hopefully between that and this video, it will make your job pretty easy to do this. And we'll be following a similar procedure as this on other work, but the scale of the work will be a lot more involved, especially on the projects. So this gives you good practice with a simple exercise. It lets you practice with your GPS unit, and you practice moving the data off of it, and you do a little simple project in ArcMap. So hopefully you enjoy this, practice it, give it a shot, and see what you can get done, and turn this in by next Sunday. I believe it is Sunday the 16th of September, and by 6 p.m. And if you have any questions, just send me a note. And again, enjoy it, and we will talk to you again soon.